Hello and welcome back to the Coming of Cage podcast, your Nicolas Cage movie review podcast. I am your host, Derek. I have your other host, Ryan, right here with me. Hello, Ryan.
That's right. I'm right here. Hi.
You're right here. If you're so close, I could touch you.
Yes, you
Your
could
face.
through the screen.
Yeah.
You may notice that Derek and I both have different backgrounds this week. If you're watching the video, you're really missing out,
And
or if you're not watching the video, you're missing out. If you're watching the video, you are not missing out. You are getting the best possible experience.
This is as good as it gets.
I've been told I have a face for radio, so maybe the people listening have the better experience. It's hard to say.
Well, the good news is you have a voice for radio. That's really the part that matters.
Thank you.
I
mean, you're the professional voice actor here, so
that is true. I was paid once.
Exactly. That makes you professional.
It does. It makes me professional. All right. So what are we doing this week? So we review Nicolas Cage movies. And this week we are talking about the 2001 animated epic, A Christmas Carol, the movie.
And if you didn't know that Nick Cage was in an adaptation of The Christmas Carol, you're not alone. Nobody knew about this. In fact, it probably made $7 on video. So one person accidentally bought it thinking it was a different version.
I mean, I would imagine that's got to be the case, right? Everybody who saw this thought it was a different one.
Yeah, it's like every time we watch an animated Nick Cage movie, I regret that we decided to do all his roles and not just his live action ones, because I regret it a little more each time because they seem to get worse and worse. I mean, with the exceptions being, Spider-Verse and Teen Titans Go to the Movies, but the more original animated movies have been sad.
Not so great. Yeah. Well, according to IMDb, this classic grossed $266,000. Not in the United States, by the way. So if you look this up, there's two dates. There's 2001 and there's 2003. 2001 is when it actually came out. 2003 was the straight to video release here in the United States. It is animated for the most part. It is bookended by live action scenes, though some releases of the film apparently ignored those, left those out. I guess the movie being 82 minutes was just a slog, so they removed a couple. It's directed by Jimmy Murakami, who did some other work on things like Heavy Metal, the movie from the 80s. Piet Kroon, was a co-writer on this. He did some animated work on The Iron Giant, and Robert Llewellyn mainly worked on Red Dwarf. So that's the creative power behind this. Nicolas Cage is joined by Kate Winslet and Simon Cowell and Michael Gambon. Those are the kind of the main heavy hitters, so to speak.
And Nick Cage is in it for approximately 7.3 seconds. So
it's a little longer than that.
He's barely in it.
He is barely in it. He's in it more than Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Yeah, but that's a pretty slim margin. I mean, a low bar to jump across. At least he had lines in this.
That's
It is weird though that this was in 2001, meaning they were probably recorded in 2000.
Yeah,
which means he was just coming off the Holy Trinity, and he was hot around this time, and this is what he decided to do, which is interesting.
I mean, it's voice work, so that's something that you can
easy.
do.
I don't want to say it's easy, but it's easier for an actor to go do voice work than it is to film in live action on a film set.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the real key, right? You can record from anywhere really in the world. Obviously, it's easier now than back then, but there were still studios all over the country. Maybe he was in UK, for some reason, and he recorded out there. It certainly seems like this was a very small production, UK production in particular. And I did not notice Saturn Entertainment being involved. Nicolas Cage's production company was not involved. So
they were not involved. Yeah, I mean, no. I'm not surprised. Even they didn't want to put their name on this.
So, yeah, I guess Ryan, you take notes, and then we go through those notes. I have to imagine that you don't have a ton.
Yeah, so I mean, if you've seen A Christmas Carol in any incarnation, then I didn't really hit a lot of the story points because nothing really changed.
Mhm.
between this and every other version of the Christmas Carol. And usually when I take notes, I only take notes on like interesting things that are happening in the movie. And to say interesting things happen in this movie would be a gross exaggeration of anything that happened in this movie. Even calling it a movie at this point is questionable. I mean, I think it fits the technical definition, but yeah.
I
So
mean, it
as
was
you mentioned,
released in theaters, so
not here.
not here, no, in a
So
theater.
as you mentioned, yeah. So if you go to like IMDb for this movie, it looks like it's an animated movie. So when you go in and they start the movie, and Charles Dickens is reading his story in live action, and a mouse scares some women in the audience, or maybe men too. I don't know. It was a woman screaming, and so because of that, Charles Dickens decides to modify his story on the spot and add a bunch more mice that are actually humans trapped in mouse bodies, because nothing they do makes any sense in this entire movie.
So I will say that because the movie started in live action, I thought I rented the wrong film at first until the mice showed
I
up.
think it's worth saying that like this movie is not an easy movie to find. This I had the hardest time finding this movie of any of the movies we've watched Nick Cage in so far,
Yes.
period. And because of the fact that it's called A Christmas Carol the movie, you know, anytime you type that into any kind of streaming browser or anything, it pulls up 100 different, you know, things called A Christmas Carol, episodes of shows that were
Mhm.
Christmas Carol based, you know, different movies with that in the title. So yeah, this movie was hard to find. It's the first movie on this podcast that I've really had to search for hard. And yeah, yeah, it was not worth it in the end. Spoiler alert.
It wasn't worth the $4 to rent on
We
Amazon
need to turn
Video.
on more ads for this this program so that I don't have to actually pay for any of this anymore, because I did not feel good about the way that money got spent.
Well, look, I have not seen every version of A Christmas Carol, but I gotta believe this is at the bottom of the barrel.
I mean, this was the worst of the ones I've seen, yeah.
Yes.
With like Muppet Christmas Carol being at the top, probably.
Well, of course. Yeah. I
Um,
don't think it gets better than the Muppets.
I mean, Muppets in anything is good. I want to see Nick Cage with the Muppets.
I would love that.
Okay, so yeah, it starts with Charles Dickens with that mouse thing I was talking about earlier, and so this was 2001. They did a CGI mouse that was quite possibly worse than even like 80s CG. I'm pretty sure Ghostbusters had more realistic effects than this CG mouse for this movie. I mean, it was really, really bad. Really bad. Do you agree with that, Derek?
100%. It,
I
it
might
made me
actually be
question
underestimating how, or under explaining how bad it actually was.
because it's in a live action scene that we haven't seen the animation yet. This is our introduction to the movie. It just looks so out of place. My first thought was, why didn't they just use a real mouse? Because like
Right. Just
at
film a
first
real
it's
mouse. It's not that big a deal.
right. Like I don't know why they couldn't have done that. It's really bad.
It's horrible. Yes. I mean, it moves like a fish. That was the weird part for me. It didn't even feel like it was actually existing on this plane, and it was like swimming. I mean, like not actually, but the way it moved made it feel like it was in water and swimming, and not actually. Yeah.
It made me feel like the live action bookends on this were like done the day before the movie came out. They were like, oh man, we need some explanation for this for some reason.
Right. Yeah. No other movie has ever needed that made on the based on the Christmas Carol, but we need that. We need Charles Dickens. Who can we get to play Charles Dickens? Yeah.
The same guy who's going to play Scrooge, apparently.
Apparently. Yeah. So then it goes to an animated, like the mouse is running around, and then it turns into an animated movie from there. And then we hear somebody say, polish your shoes, sir, about 25 times.
Yeah.
I have to wonder how much that voice actor got paid. And how many, like, were they just like, can you just give us polish your shoes, sir, 25 times in different inflections with each one?
Yeah, I mean,
And
there's a minimum rate if it was a union deal,
right,
so
I feel like that person made out. They just had to say that one line a bunch of times.
a
Basically, it
bunch.
was Scrooge just like walking through the streets and a bunch of people trying to perform services for him or on him.
Yeah, look, if you've ever watched A Christmas Carol, this is an extremely by the notes,
Yeah,
right, version of the
adaptation.
film, with the exception of the mice. They're like the only thing that's new,
Yeah. That
right?
was like
So,
the one differentiating factor between this and other Christmas Carol movies.
right. So you have Scrooge is rich and he's an asshole, and everybody else is extremely poor and he's mean to them. That's the movie.
Yeah. So we right away find out that Marley is dead. There's some line that says that he's dead.
Mm-hmm.
So, but if you know the story, then obviously that probably isn't a big surprise to you. And we start to see the mice in the story, and we find out that Scrooge is he's mean to everybody, but he really likes the mice.
The one mouse. He likes
Well,
the
the
one
one mouse, yeah.
mouse.
There's one mouse that he's friends with, and for some reason, these mice in this movie are not mice of this world.
No.
They are mice that can do sign language, that can think on a like creative level, on the level of humans. If you basically think of them as humans trapped in little mouse bodies that can't talk,
Yeah.
that's essentially they're like full human intelligence levels.
Right. They just don't speak.
They just don't speak, but they can literally sign things and yeah.
Mm-hmm. They can
Um,
read. I mean, later in the movie, they
that's true.
literally read English.
Yeah. So that I mean, in this universe, maybe they are a human that has been transformed into a mouse via magic or something. I mean, there are some weird
Sad.
like space time things happening later that we'll get into. Um, yeah. So that note was mice are uncharacteristically helpful and friendly.
Mm-hmm.
If you've ever met a mouse in real life, a wild mouse just like running around, they're not generally super friendly. They usually try and hang out away from where they could be seen, and will just like
Typically.
run out to snag some food and run back in, unless you've trained them to know that if they come up to you, they get food or something. Um,
Ratatouille is not realistic, is what we're
right, right,
saying
right.
here.
My next note is this animation is terrible, really, really bad, and I hate to disparage artists, I really do, but I mean it's just really bad. There's nothing nice I can say about any of the animation in this at
It
all.
looks at least 15, 20 years older than it is, at least.
And it looks like even then it was made for like a budget that was so low. I mean, Looney Tunes looked better than this by a lot.
Absolutely.
By
Yeah.
a lot.
It's grainy, it's simple, like, and like, again, right, to your point, like, I don't want to knock on a particular style or anything like that, because there's a place for different styles. It just felt so hastily
Bland.
done and cheaply done.
And just bland. Like there was no
Yeah.
exciting color or anything. Like, yeah, it was just the
The characters
most.
don't stand out. I
Some of
easy
them are
now
hard
that
to even tell apart. They use like the same
yes,
faces.
exactly. And like, I'm a little colorblind. I'll admit that. But the two mice, I confused the two
Yeah,
mice
one was just
throughout.
like a slightly lighter brown than the other one.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for a colorblind person, it's probably a nightmare.
I was like, which one is that? The Scrooge mouse or the other mouse? I don't know. They couldn't have given him something. Like, I
Right.
don't know.
Like I put a bow on one of them or something.
There you go. A little tie on the Scrooge.
Right, exactly. Have him tie a little bow around his neck or something. Um, so Scrooge in the beginning of this movie is buying out debts as if like, in the real world, like a credit card company sells the debts that people aren't paying to other collection companies. Basically, Scrooge is the collection company. And he sends police out to go arrest people that are past due, essentially.
Yeah.
And one of those people happens to be what is apparently the only doctor in the entirety of this city.
At least a pediatrician, anyway. We never see him like with adults, but yeah.
Yeah, he is a very important pillar of this community who is apparently past due on some bills and gets arrested. And kind of the whole crux of the film anchors on one of his nurses that knew Scrooge years before and had a relationship with him. And like it sees the doctor get arrested and realizes that everybody in this entire city is going to die if this doctor does not get out of jail.
Right.
Essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
My next
And
note
like
is comb
the
over.
sorry, I was just gonna say the guy who's doing this for Scrooge, whatever is old Joe, is like really happy about destroying
Yeah, he
people's
loves it.
lives.
It's like his
Right.
favorite thing in the world.
Like that's the
And
other thing. Like,
especially like on Christmas Eve. He's like, man,
right.
we are really fucking these guys' lives up and I love it.
Like he purposely goes and scares sick children who are like more or less in a hospital ward, right? That he's about to kick them out of on Christmas Eve. Like this steers so hard into these are really evil people, that it's a little
Well, yeah, because
ridiculous.
they have to make Scrooge look like less of a bad person. So they have to have somebody worse than him.
I guess that's true.
You know what I mean? It's just like other Nick Cage movies we're reviewing where he's just the least asshole of
That's
all the
right.
assholes in the movie. Yeah, so my next note is comb over because
Comb
one of the
over.
characters, I don't remember who it is, has just a really terrible comb over.
Was
And
that
it's
old
like
Joe?
animated to be, it might have been, it was just animated to be like a really terrible comb over. Like they put extra effort to make sure it looked really bad.
Hmm.
Like if somebody had this hairstyle in real life, I would be tempted to say something to him that, we got to do something about this, man. I'm sorry, I care about you.
Okay.
It was just really bad.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm not usually that callous and cruel towards people around me. I'm just using that as emphasis on how bad this haircut was. Um, so then we get our first look at the ghostly Nick Cage. It
Yeah.
has so much post processing done on the sound that you can't even really tell it's him,
Barely.
but it does kind of look like him.
I guess a little. I mean,
As much as this art style could give.
but he's got like these, his eyes are like shooting out rays of light, and so is his mouth, and so he's kind of hard to look at. And
I think that's
uh,
actually real life. That's how he is in real life. They just
whenever you
animated that
film
in.
him, that's just what happens.
Right. Rays of light. They have to tone it down when they film him. It's just they use CG to remove it. Um, yeah, my next note is collecting door-to-door donations on Christmas Eve. Because there's a couple of guys
Yeah.
that come to Scrooge's door. It's like everybody knows who Scrooge is, but still these guys are like, we got to hit this guy up for some money on Christmas Eve. It was really weird. I didn't understand why that's happening on Christmas Eve. Why are any of these people why are collections people working on Christmas Eve?
I mean, I don't know. It's a long time ago. Maybe things were different then. Scrooge does seem to be the only person working at this point.
Yeah. Well, his Bob Cratchit or whatever the guy's name is
Well,
also working.
right. I meant like, but business wise, like they're the only
Oh,
ones still
yeah.
open, right? Like everybody else has
Jobs
gone
seem hard
home,
to find, yeah, in this area right
or yeah, I don't know. It is odd, but
now.
all the Christmas carols have that though, so it's hard for me to knock this movie for it.
Right, that's fair. The door they all have the door-to-door
Yeah,
person on Christmas
I
Eve?
mean the
Oh,
Muppet
okay.
one does.
That's oh yeah, that's true. It's just a weird thing in all those movies. I don't know why.
Yeah,
It's probably I'll imagine it's in the original story.
that's my guess. By the way, I do have one interesting fact because it ties into the Muppet version. Apparently, this version and that version are the only two versions that, towards the end of the movie, do the Cratchit family and the Fred party scenes in the order that they're in. Apparently, every other version of the film does them in the other order. I don't know why you would change it or why just those two movies changed it, but that's the only thing they have in common with each other.
I mean,
There you
that's
go.
not as fun of a fact as you think it is,
I
but
said interesting. I didn't say fun.
that's true. That's okay.
It's
I
not
mean,
fun.
it's still not that interesting, really. But
Fair enough.
well, I guess we're really scraping the bottom of the
I'm
barrel for this
trying.
episode.
I'm trying.
Yeah. So my next note is what's with the fucking mice? Because at this point they've shown up like 17 times, and like
Oh my god.
to like 14 different people, and they've shown up, and they're just so friendly and helpful to literally every person. The like sick children in the medical ward have a mouse that's just their friend, and Scrooge has his mouse friend, and the live act. These mice just keep showing up, like they're just in the background of a scene doing something, and it doesn't contribute to anything at all.
I do think it's supposed to be the same two mice.
Probably, but it's just kind of unclear. Like that mouse traveled all the way from the sick ward just to hang out with his buddy at Scrooge's house.
Well, they met there.
You really followed this mouse story more than I
I
did.
tried. So what happens is that what's her name? Belle, Kate Winslet's character.
Yeah.
She writes this letter to Scrooge, basically pleading for help. And her mouse, whatever that mouse's name is,
The one that
goes
was with
with
the sick
her.
children.
Yes, that's where the sick children are.
Yeah.
But that mouse goes with Belle in the letter, which goes to Scrooge's, and then the two mice meet each other there. The Scrooge mouse is a little standoffish at first. They're like, really, that's the story here is the mice. This is such a
I
bad
mean,
movie.
I'm listening to this and going, man, there's so much mouse story that I guess I just didn't care enough about to put to memory, but you really were in on the mouse story.
They're the only interesting thing happening, man. Like
And even
when the
calling
letter
them
gets
interesting
delivered,
is like a stretch.
well, I mean, it's better than just staring at a blank screen, I guess. But like when Bell gives Cratchit the letter, right? He ends up like knocking it on the floor, and the mouse is like, ah, like like that's the only thing really happening is we're watching the mouse react to the humans.
And eventually the mice like drag the letter all the way to Scrooge's bed and like
Yeah.
lay it next to him on the bed.
Mm-hmm.
And he sees it and goes, "Oh, the letter. Oh, I'll read that later."
And then immediately falls asleep.
And then immediately falls asleep, and we get the flaming head ghost of Christmas past,
Yes.
which kind of transitions between old lady and young lady with hair on fire.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what that was supposed to be about. Like when he's remembering the past fondly, she's younger.
Yeah,
Or when he's justifying bad things that happened in his past, she gets older.
maybe.
I'm
I
not
don't know.
sure.
I think maybe you're putting more thought into it than the people that animated it did.
Maybe.
I mean, again, I feel really bad disparaging these artists, but I can't imagine the artists that were working on this were like, we love this art. And, this is great. They are probably like, I'm taking this paycheck. Um, this looks not great, but I'm going to deal with it.
I mean, it was a small UK release. Maybe it was like the first film for this animation studio or something.
Probably the last one, too, I'm going to guess.
Uh,
Sadly. Okay, so we start to get into the weird stuff here. So I'm going to ask you, Derek, in this movie and in like other Christmas Carol movies you've seen, is Scrooge's physical body going with the spirits, or is it his like astral projection? It's like, is it like his spirit that's going with the spirits? Is he physically time traveling, or is this just like his spirit going with them?
I mean, I've seen it both ways.
Okay, in this movie, which way did you feel like it was?
I felt like it was his physical body
Okay,
because nothing's
so
left behind.
no, but he's bringing two other beings with him,
Right. The mice.
time traveling.
Yeah.
Well, not just time traveling, multiverse hopping, because he's seeing alternate realities. Would that not like traumatize these human intelligence mice?
What alternate realities?
He's seeing a reality where like he's not around.
Oh, you mean when they go to the future?
Yeah.
Gotcha. I mean, yeah. I mean, there's, I don't know, man. They fly at one point. The
I know,
mice are
that's what I'm
flying
saying.
at one
That's what I'm
point.
saying.
Like,
They're literally like, it's just
so
I'm trying to find something, man. Like multiverse hopping is like the biggest stretch that I can get to in this movie. Is something interesting to talk about.
I mean, I don't know that it's universe hopping. It's supposed to be showing Scrooge's future if he doesn't change his ways. I don't know that it's really a multiverse.
Well, okay, so what is it? It's
It
an
is.
alternate timeline.
It's a possible future. That's all.
So then his physical body is going to a possible future?
Yes.
Well, that doesn't make any sense because that would make it a different timeline.
Well, the thing is, you have to remember here, right? There's no science here. This is just magic, right? This isn't like they made a time machine right? Or anything like that. Like this is straight up magic. This is Christmas magic, right? And you're talking to a Jew here. So I'm trying real hard to make this make
Yeah,
sense.
right, right. I got to remember that.
And
There's nothing.
frankly, I'd rather watch the Bill Murray version of this.
There's
All
nothing
right.
in the Jewish religion that would explain what's happening in this Christmas Carol movie.
I'm not going to
I'm
go so far as
stretching,
to
man.
say
I'm
nothing
sorry.
because I am no expert in my
Right.
people.
That's fair. I mean, you were the one that brought it up, so that's why I was asking.
Well, what I mean by that is I'm not what it means I'm less of an expert on Christmas.
That's fair. I would consider myself an expert on Christmas, and I still don't know what the fuck is going on. Anyway, that
Like,
was
look,
the
look,
most interesting. That was the most interesting thing I had to talk about was potential time travel or like alternate timeline jumping with two mice that have human intelligence in your pocket.
no, I mean, look, I watched three versions of this movie. I watched the Muppet one because Muppets.
Yeah.
I watched the one that has Patrick Stewart in it
Mm-hmm.
because Trekkie,
Which came
and I
out 2 years before this one. So I mean,
give or
I think
take,
that
yeah.
was 99. Yeah.
And then I watched Scrooge, the Bill Murray one. Those are the only three versions that I watch.
I mean, yeah. And Muppet Christmas Carol and Scrooge are definitely in the top two for me.
Right?
Yeah. Um. So we get to see a little bit of his history with Belle, and we see that essentially they were dating, and his marriage proposal was essentially a business contract.
It's a prenup.
Essentially, yeah, a prenuptial business contract
What an
saying we have
ass.
different lifestyles, so I have more to lose than you do, essentially. Yeah, so my next note is mice can read.
Legit.
They can read English.
Yep.
So while I don't know what a mouse lifespan is, but I can't imagine. I mean, I know how long it takes humans to learn to read, approximately, and I feel like that's longer than a mouse's lifespan.
Well, let's see. They range, depends on the type of mouse,
Like a
5 to 7
those were like
years.
field mice. There's no
Field
way they
mice. Okay. Field mouse.
lifespan.
One
Yeah,
year.
1 year.
One
Yeah.
year.
So not only did they learn to communicate in sign language and read English, but now they've experienced alternate timelines and alternate realities. I feel like these mice are going to be like the I don't know, man. They're like elders, and like they're going to have so many legends passed down to their children that you know over the next generation of a year they're going to become like I don't know heroes of the mouse world. It's just a really weird thing to think about.
I mean, especially since this is probably the only Christmas they're ever going to experience.
Exactly, because they live for less than a year, unless they were born like literally right before Christmas, and then they live longer than the average.
I mean, if Scrooge really took care of his mouse, they can, I guess, live up to 2 years.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I don't know how good veterinary care for mice was back then.
Back
Based on the
then,
way they treat Tiny Tim, I feel like human care was not that good. So veterinary care was probably non-existent.
true, but I mean, Scrooge's mouse was eating better than Tiny Tim. So
It is funny because going through these notes, I can see where I started to fall asleep and being so bored in this movie because my handwriting gets worse and worse as the thing goes on. I can barely make out these notes towards the latter half.
oh no.
Flying montage is what the next one says, where we just
Uh-huh.
get like 10 minutes of one of the ghosts flying with Scrooge and the mice through
Yeah, I think that
whatever.
was Christmas Present, which is Michael Gambon. I'm pretty sure it was him because there's not a lot of talking, right?
Yeah,
It's
it's
just
literally
it's just
just
music.
flying.
Yeah.
It's like they ran out of animation budget, so they were just like reusing a bunch of flying shots with different backgrounds.
Part of me thinks they like finished the cut of the film. They're like, this is too short.
Yeah, we need another 10 minutes of flying, and we need the mice to have their own little flying segment, as if they
Yeah,
were flying squirrels or something.
they legit fly in the scene.
Uh, taking kids' toy box to pay debts.
Yeah, man. That's what I'm talking about. Old Joe is emptying out the children's hospital, and he is so happy to do it. So
Yeah,
happy. A terrible person.
toddler aging to skeleton. is my next note.
Okay. So this is ingrained in my brain. I will die with these images in my brain. So there's a scene later where there's like two little babies, and one is like ignorance and one is want,
Yeah.
right? And want is supposed to be like a thing that we can like can be fulfilled externally from time to time, but it has to be refilled. And then ignorance has to be chosen. You have to choose to no longer be ignorant, and that baby like turns into a decaying skeleton. It was freaking horrifying. I don't know why that's in there at all.
It was a weird, yeah, it was a weird scene, and I had a feeling that you would have some opinions on that. So
Well, because like I don't know what it's for. So the whole point of the Scrooge character, right, is he's become this bitter, selfish, cruel old man. He's not ignorant. He's mean,
yeah,
right? And it's not that he's living this lavish lifestyle either. Most of the time, most of these versions of the film that you see, he doesn't really spend money on himself either, right? He keeps his heat down and his lights off and like things like that. So the want and ignorance babies or toddlers or whatever monsters they are, I don't know what that has to do with the movie.
I think they were just like, well, we've not given these animators anything fun to do for a while, so let's just let them portray the most horrifying thing I've ever seen in my life.
It was creepy, dude.
So my next note either says Tiny Tim dies or Tiny Tim pies.
Well, he doesn't die.
Okay, so I just this for the listeners, this part's not going to be very fun, but for the watchers, here just to show you, like I don't have great handwriting to begin with, but at least it's legible right there, right? Live actions. But when you get down to the end of the next page, it's getting much worse. I think it might say
wait a minute.
Tiny Jim pies. I don't really
I got
know.
it now. Tiny Tim dies. You're talking about when he's with the ghost of Christmas future, and there is the scene at the Cratchit house where Tiny Tim is dead. It's a future Christmas. It's some Christmas down the road, and they just have Timmy's crutches by the dinner table.
Yeah. Oh my god. Yeah.
I mean, they did that, dude. They do that in the Muppet version, man.
They do. Yeah, I know, but it's it never gets any easier.
Like honestly, when I remember when I first saw that in the Muppet version, because I was an adult when I finally watched the Muppet version, and because I mean, like, I didn't really watch Christmas movies growing up, and I finally watched it. I'm like, I can't believe they kept this part in the movie.
Listen, they didn't pull any punches.
They just killed Kermit's nephew.
Listen, he had it coming. Let's get real. Cruel future. Cruel future is what my next note says.
Yeah, it's the whole this part is very by the numbers, right?
Yeah.
Scrooge is dead, and everybody's happy to see him gone, and they're making jokes about his death and his funeral, and nobody misses him and everything like that. And he realizes, which to me, this never worked for me as like a narrative piece. Like he thought people would miss him. He's a smart person. He might be mean, right, but he's not dumb. He's highly intelligent. He thought he'd be missed by who?
Yeah. Nobody. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, that part is kind of a leap of faith there that you just have to kind of go with the story on because it doesn't make any sense.
I refuse.
Then we get a little snippet of Nick Cage again.
Very little, even less this time.
Yeah, very tiny note.
I did think it was interesting. The one thing I liked about Marley's portrayal here is the way they did the chains, because he's constantly being pulled back.
Yeah, that was interesting. But I think that's the way it actually is in the book. Or in the
story. I just don't think I've ever seen it depicted well.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, that was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he wakes up on Christmas Day, having gone through all these spirits, and immediately he's a giant dick to the first kid he sees on the street. And then he realizes he was a dick. So he goes back to the window and says he's sorry, and then immediately puts the kid to work.
Old habits, man.
Yeah, he throws him some money and says, go find these people and bring them a goose or something. And like, this kid is expected to go find a goose on Christmas Day and then find out who these people are and deliver it to their house.
The delivery part is believable because this is so like it's a small area, right? Like it's a long time ago. You didn't really have addresses per se. What I don't buy is who's open right now selling
Selling goose, yeah,
goose
geese.
or whatever, turkeys or whatever.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. But that's not anything specific against this movie. It's just I think that's in the story. It's just because other Christmas carols have that too.
Yeah.
Just more of a story criticism. Then we get a musical montage.
Do we? I don't remember that.
I mean, I have that as my note, but I pretty much don't
Okay.
remember any of this past where when it starts getting really. I mean, this is almost as bad as the Croods in the sense that I
Oh,
don't remember.
this is when Scrooge is running through the town trying to be nice to everybody, and everyone thinks he's being really weird
Yeah, my memory is
because he's
fuzzy after the flying montage.
like,
Once that happened, I was like, nah, I'm not doing any more montages.
nah, this is a weird set of scenes because it makes sense. Everyone's reaction to him works for me because if this person has been horrible to everybody forever, and that's the only thing he's known for, and even if you don't know him, you know he's a bad guy. And now he's running around like giving gifts to kids and joking around and all this and playing in the snow. Everyone must have think that he snapped,
Probably, yeah. They probably put him
right?
away after this.
Like he had a
Um,
nervous breakdown.
Boring AF is my next note.
But the whole movie,
I think, yeah. I mean, at that point, I had stopped paying attention. I think, and was just because I was so bored. I was just notating how bored I was.
yeah, it's a boring movie, man. Like it's only like I think it was 82 minutes, and that's too long.
It felt like it was 2 hours, more than 2 hours. I mean, it was terrible. And then my last note is bad CG mouse kisses.
Yeah, because the mice come back at the end
Yeah.
in the live action scene. Then we get both mice, and that's where the movie has its Dark Knight Rises moment, where it's like, okay, the audience clearly doesn't understand that the mouse from the beginning of the movie is the same mouse from the rest of the movie, so we're going to show them again that it's the same mouse by showing them the other mouse.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's it. That's it. So Charles Dickens, he didn't make up the story. He, I guess, what did the mice like write it down for him or something? I don't know.
I assume that, yeah, the mouse with their newfound sentience and longer lifespans and multiverse hopping have decided that they can just come to our timeline and write this story for him.
And that's it, man. That's the movie.
Yeah.
Do you have any more notes?
So, no, that's the end of my notes. But I thought, since this is kind of a short podcast because it was so bad and by the numbers, that it might be fun to read some highlights from IMDb user reviews for this movie and
Yes.
see what you agree with and don't agree with. Okay, so let's start with a. There's a 10 out of 10 in here. Let me find it.
Oh my God.
I know you're gonna like this. Let's see. Oh, there's a 1 out of 10. There's a lot of 1 out of 10s. That's why I thought I'm gonna find a 10 out of 10 because that's gonna be the person that well, here we go. A top-notch adaptation of the Christmas classic. That's the title for this.
Maybe they had never seen any of the other ones.
The user is Jaw Kitty 71.
I mean, has anybody read A Christmas Carol? Like, really?
Probably not. This film to me is one of the best adaptations of the Charles Dickens classic I have ever seen. Of course, the version from 1951 starring Alastair Sim is the one my family loves, but to me, both versions are excellent. I was also shocked by the negativity I had heard on the web. As I have said many, many times, I had watched this version, and quite frankly, I found it awesome.
Whew.
I don't have a favorite scene because I love the whole film, and I would like to say that the voice casting for the film is top-notch.
Okay.
There's a 1 out of 10. Ask yourself why you are watching this, is the title.
Because we have to.
If you are watching this movie to compare it to the others, first let's start out with the awful 1970s animation. We agree with that. We touched on it. You said 20 years. He went 30. No. Yes, I know this film came out in 2001, but you wouldn't know it by the animation. Secondly, Scrooge was nice to mice? Scrooge? Really? I don't think so. That's also a fair point. Next, how could you have Scrooge throw a bucket of water onto Tiny Tim? Scrooge is a mean person, but an action like this would be out of character for him. I don't necessarily agree with that. If you're a
Well,
dick, you're a dick.
the only reason I would agree with it is if he's opening himself up to like being charged with a crime, and I don't think he would do that. He's a very measured person in every other adaptation I've
Right.
seen, right? He doesn't have those types of things. Like he could have killed the kid and then gotten in trouble for it. I agree. I agree. That's out of
Okay,
character.
fair enough. Okay, well, here you're gonna like this line. Let's not even discuss the use of Nicolas Cage as Jacob Marley. Simply a horrible choice.
I
This
mean,
user has some pretty strong feelings. This next part, though, I want to get him and the 10 out of 10 guy together. Because, 50 years before this movie came out, the best rendition of the story was made with Alastair Sim as Ebenezer Scrooge. So watch this one for your kids. Then, when they're old enough, show them a good movie like the 1951 Alastair Sim version. So this guy and the other 1 out of 10, or the 10 out of 10 guy, both love the 1950s movie with Alastair Sim. They both mention him by name.
that must be because they grew up with it and it's like nostalgic for them.
Maybe, I don't
It's
know.
got to be.
Let's see if there's any in the middle here. That one might be better.
But by the way, like if you're looking for an animated version of this for your kids, there are other animated versions of this, including one that stars Jim Carrey as Scrooge. That's supposedly pretty good.
1 out of 10. Who thought this was a good idea? Is the title. The highlights are this adaptation plays far too fast and loose with the story, some of which was playing down to children, but in other ways was just messing with the tale in wholly unnecessary ways. Strong arm ruffian police carting people to debtor's prison. An extended part for Belle that messed with an entire part of the story. A too coincidental connection between Tiny Tim and a Scrooge debtor victim, and on and on. To top it off, they added mice characters who, while they don't actually talk, have super intelligence and can manipulate, observe, proceeding like small humans. Yeah.
Oh my god, that's hilarious.
Yeah. Let's see. We'll do one more, and then we'll go through our rating. How about that?
All right.
Here's a 3 out of 10. Atrocious is the title. Christmas Carol adaptations are 10 a penny or dime a dozen, since most are from the U.S., but it would be a challenge to find one as awful as this one. Only the Kelsey Grammer TV movie is arguably worse.
Oof.
In addition to the lifeless, uninteresting animation, we have a bunch of pointless additions to the story that do nothing except detract from the original ideas of the novel.
Now that guy mentions it or that person mentions it, I did see the Kelsey Grammer one, and that one's better than this.
Okay, fair enough.
I'd rather watch the Kelsey Grammer one.
Here you go. This guy agrees with you. However, perhaps the stupidest, most ill-judged part of this film is when Scrooge throws a bucket of water over Tiny Tim, causing him to contract pneumonia again, leading presumably to his death. So in this version, Scrooge is directly responsible for the boy's passing. This film has the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Positives? Well, perhaps it's worth mentioning that Scrooge finds it incredibly difficult to change his ways on Christmas morning. It's perhaps a little jarring to see an adaptation take this route, but I guess it's realistic that after a lifetime of miserly ways, Scrooge isn't going to turn into Santa Claus instantly. But that's all I can say that's good about this. I'm at a loss as to how this insipid thing attracted so many star names to lend their voices. While I can accept that Nicolas Cage as Marley will appear in anything these days, I can't really explain the presence of Callow or Winslet. Man, a lot of people throwing some shade on old Nick on this one.
I mean, like, here's the thing: the Marley role is so small.
Like, who cares? It could have
been anybody.
Yeah, I love Nick, but yeah, it could have literally been anybody, and it wouldn't have changed the movie at all.
Not in any way. And same with any of these other characters. Like Kate Winslet's got a pretty big role, but it's not like I was thinking about it being her while I'm watching the movie or anything like that.
Right.
Okay,
yeah. Well, we need to rate this and go on our Cajo meter.
All right. So we rate our movies overall quality and overall caginess scale from 0 to 20, 0 low, 20 high. I mean, from a quality standpoint, like this is a terrible movie, but we've also watched some other like really terrible movies. It's more coherent than say Prisoners of the Ghostland.
It's hard to compare it to that though, because that's an artistic, like that was a director's like artistic thing, whereas this is an adaptation of somebody else's story.
I mean, that's certainly true. But like, I gave Dog Eat Dog a 3. I gave Zondali a 2. I gave Rage a 4.
But I would rather watch any of those movies than watch this one again. Is that true for you? I know you hated Zondali a lot. but
I hated Zondali, and I really dislike Dog Eat Dog. I'm going to give this a 4
wow, okay.
because I
Um,
would rather watch it than those two, than Zondali and Dog Eat Dog.
I'd rather watch either of those than this one, so I'm going to give it a 2.
You're giving it a 2. Okay, so a 2 for Ryan and a 4 for me. So that gives it a 3 overall. Okay, which is pretty low. I'm not gonna lie,
Yeah,
it's pretty low. Puts it right between Zondali and Dog Eat Dog, by the way.
which is fair.
Right in the middle there. All right, so now we've got overall caginess, and I mean he's barely in the movie. It's a very
And they
exaggerated
messed with his
role,
voice so much that
but
it's hard to even tell.
exactly. So like I hesitate to give it a 1, but like I can't put it too high. What are you thinking?
I think it's a 1. I mean,
Yeah.
there's literally no caginess.
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna go with you on that because I don't have a good reason to rate it higher than that. It just when I think of what we gave a 1 to, like, you know, Joe or Snowden,
I
Left
think this has
Behind.
as much caginess as those.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Fair enough. So a 3 on quality and a 1 on caginess, I think puts it like really down in the bottom by itself. Just gonna throw that
Probably.
out there.
I'm glad that it's there. It deserves to be there. It's a pile of garbage.
All right, so now we have to figure out which movie is going to join our Wheel O Cage. We spin our Wheel O Cage to pick our Nicolas Cage movies. And of course, this movie is no longer on the wheel. It is going to be replaced by Bangkok Dangerous, which, if I recall, has a really terrible movie poster.
The only thing I know about this movie is that when I bought a new TV, there's like Samsung's own TV channel, and sometimes it pops up. And there was one day that we turned the TV on, and it automatically popped up, and Bangkok Dangerous was playing. And I saw like 4 seconds of it, and it looked about like you would expect a movie starring Nicolas Cage called Bangkok Dangerous to look.
Fantastic.
So, yeah,
I remember he's holding like a gun on the poster and his hand is photoshopped. It's like huge compared to the rest of his body.
wow.
But and I forgot to mention, but it's worth noting that Dream Scenario is now eligible to join the wheel. So
But it's
that
not on the wheel.
it's not yet, but it could be picked at any time now, just so people are aware. So, all right. So that has joined the wheel. To find out which Nicolas Cage movie we're going to talk about next time on the show, go to comingofcage.com or follow us at Coming of Cage and watch our Wheel O Cage spin. Normally, you'd also be able to watch our Cage O Bingo series, but neither Ryan nor I got a single square on this movie. So we're not going to release a video for it because why waste your time?
Yeah, we value your time and our time more than that. So
But next time for sure.
that's right.
Whatever that ends up being. But you can, of course, subscribe to us on your podcast app of choice. Yeah, Apple, Spotify, Spreaker, what have you. You can watch us on our YouTube channel, Derrico Studios. That's our production company there. And Ryan, do you have any final thoughts on Christmas Carol, the movie?
Yeah, go literally watch any other version of this movie than this one, but preferably
Sounds
the
fair.
Muppet one
Preferably. Or Bill Murray's.
or Bill Murray's. We watch that on Christmas.
Yeah, they're both good. All right. Well, that's it for us. We're the Coming of Cage podcast, comingofcage.com. Catch you next time.